There's a person in your life right now. You'd call them close. You'd say you trust them. And somewhere, in the back of something you don't fully listen to, you already know they are costing you more than you've admitted. Not in a dramatic way, not in a betrayal you can point to, just quietly, consistently. In the direction your life is not going. Here is the mechanism. Proximity is transfer. Every person you allow close is either building your future or spending it, slowly, without asking, and usually without knowing they're doing it. The cost of not seeing this isn't one bad relationship. It's a compounding one, like interest on debt you didn't sign for. By the end of this, you'll be able to read exactly what the people in your inner circle are doing to your trajectory, and you'll have a precise system for deciding who stays. Before we go further, think of one person in your life who drains you but who you keep defending. Hold them in mind. That's your answer to the comment question at the end. If this is already landing, stay close. It gets sharper. Principle 1. The invisible tax. Most people think proximity is neutral, that the people around you are just there, background, furniture. That's the first mistake. Machiavelli understood something that takes most people decades to learn. Your advisors are never neutral. Every person in your counsel has an interest, and their interest is rarely identical to yours. He wasn't talking about enemies. He was talking about the people who love you, because love doesn't dissolve agenda. Love just makes the agenda harder to see. Here's the flip. You think you're choosing your circle based on loyalty, history, comfort. And you are. But what you're also choosing, without knowing it, is a ceiling. Every person close to you has a version of you in their head, a version they're comfortable with, a version that doesn't threaten them. And every time you try to move beyond that version, there will be friction. It won't feel like sabotage. It will feel like concern. Are you sure about that? You've changed lately. I just don't want you to get hurt. That friction is the tax. Not because they're evil, because you growing creates distance between you and the person they need you to be. Machiavelli called it counsel corruption, the slow drift of advice toward the counselor's comfort rather than the prince's benefit. It doesn't require malice, it only requires self-interest, and everyone has that. The behavior shift: start noticing who in your life gets quiet when you win. Not angry, just quiet. That silence is information. The consequence: once you see the tax, you can't unsee it. And what you can't unsee, you can finally choose. If that just shifted something, this channel is built for exactly that. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Principle 2. The projection trap. Picture this. You've been offered something. A new role, a move, a chance that would require you to become different, bigger than the version of yourself your oldest friend has known for 15 years. You tell them, and they pause. Not long, just a beat. That sounds like a lot. Are you sure you're ready for that? You nod. You change the subject. And somewhere between that conversation and that night, the confidence you had that morning becomes a question. What just happened? Jung called it projection, but not in the way most people use the word. They think projection means accusing others of their own flaws. That's only half of it. What you see in another person is always filtered through your own unexamined interior. Your fear of failure becomes their concern for you. Their ceiling, what they believe is possible, becomes the advice they give you. They're not lying. They're giving you a map of their own interior landscape and calling it wisdom about yours. And here's the part that stings: you accept it. Because it sounds like love. Because it feels like care. Because the person delivering it has known you the longest, and we mistake duration for accuracy. Most people never realize that the people who've known them longest are often the worst predictors of what they're capable of becoming. They knew the old version. They have a stake in its continuity. You take their ceiling as your data. Stop asking, do they mean well, and start asking, are they accurate? Those are not the same question. You can be deeply loved and consistently misread. Accurate sight isn't cold. It's the only real foundation for decisions that don't cost you years. Principle 3, the frame design. Here is the hard rule. Your inner circle is not just emotional support. It is an architecture. It shapes what you believe is normal, what you believe is possible, and what you believe you deserve. That architecture was designed not by you, mostly before you were old enough to ask who was doing the designing. Think about the rooms you grew up in, not physically, economically, the conversations about money, about ambition, about what kind of person has the audacity to want more. Those conversations didn't disappear. They became the inner voice you mistake for your own intuition. A mirror in a dark room doesn't show you what you look like. It shows you what the room looks like. Most people are navigating their lives using a reflection from a room they haven't been in for 10 years. They think they're seeing themselves. They're seeing old light. Robert Greene identified this as court contamination. The environment around you doesn't just influence your decisions. It filters what options you can perceive in the first place. You cannot think thoughts that your environment makes invisible, and the people in your environment are the environment, not some of it, most of it. The version of you that is possible in your current circle is not the same as the version possible in a different one. Not because you're different. Because what's visible, what's thinkable, expands or contracts with who is in the room. Change the court, literally if necessary. You might feel the urge to stop here, to save this for later. Don't. Because what comes next is the part most people never reach. And it's the only part that actually changes the behavior you've been repeating for years. Principle 4, the Wealth Topology. 10-second self-test. Think about the 5 people you spend the most real time with. Not your aspirational list, the actual people. Now ask, what is the ambient conversation in those relationships? What gets talked about most? If the answer is problems, drama, the past, other people's business, or survival, that is not a coincidence. That is a topology, a shape that your thinking has been molded around. Wealth. And I mean this in the broadest sense. Financial, mental, relational, reputational is not just a product of your decisions. It's a product of your defaults. And your defaults are largely set by the people you repeat yourself around. Here is the modern example. 2 people with identical salaries, identical skills, identical starting points. In 5 years, one has built something, one hasn't. The variable most people overlook isn't discipline or intelligence. It's whose voice they heard most often when they were deciding. Whose voice is loudest in yours right now? Not the voice you chose, the voice that got there first. The one that sounds like a warning but functions like a wall. Is this conversation expanding what's possible for me or contracting it? Ask that once per day. For the relationships that matter most, you'll have an answer inside a week. Give yourself permission to ration access, not in anger, but in architecture. You are not required to give everyone who loves you an equal seat at the table of your decision-making, and they will. Not because you've done something wrong, because you've done something different. And different to someone invested in your sameness is a provocation. Principle 5. The selection mechanism. Here's the flip most people never make. They spend years trying to change the people close to them. Trying to elevate the conversation, shift the energy, drag the relationship towards something more aligned with who they're becoming. That is compassion. It is also, frequently, a mistake. Not because people can't change, but because the energy you spend trying to change the room is energy you're not spending building a different one. I watched this happen once. Someone spent 3 years trying to get their oldest friend to believe in a business they were building. Every week, a new conversation. Every week, the same skepticism dressed in new concern. By the time the business succeeded, they had spent the equivalent of a year of Sundays seeking approval from someone who had already decided. The approval never came. The business grew anyway. But the cost, in clarity, in confidence, in momentum, was real. We confuse loyalty with alignment. Loyalty is about the past. Who was there? Who stayed? Alignment is about direction. Where are we both going? You can honor the loyalty and still acknowledge the misalignment. You don't have to choose cruelty, but you do have to choose clarity. Stop auditing relationships by how long they've lasted. Start auditing them by where they're pointed. Duration is not direction. Principle 6, the mirror recalibration. You meet someone new, they're moving, building. They think in a register you haven't encountered before, not because they're smarter, but because they've simply been surrounded by different questions for longer. And something strange happens. Your old voice, the one that sounds like protection, gets louder. They're showing off. That's not realistic. Who do they think they are? Stop. That voice is not assessment. That is your current ceiling defending itself. Jung would call this shadow projection. The discomfort isn't really about them. It's about what their existence reveals about what you haven't yet permitted yourself to want. The recalibration is not warm, but it is accurate. Every person who triggers you with their ambition is showing you the edge of your own permission. That edge is not a boundary you were born with. It was installed. And what was installed can be removed. Most people spend their lives in rooms that confirm who they've already decided to be. The dangerous move, the real one, is deliberately placing yourself in rooms that haven't decided yet. Not to perform, not to network. To recalibrate what normal feels like. Everything in this video is a concept until you anchor it to a daily behavior. Here is the system that makes it real. What I'm about to give you took years to distill. Subscribe if you want the rest of the series. Morning Prime. Before the day starts, before the phone. One question only. Who do I need to limit access to today? And who do I need to move toward? Not as judgment, as architecture. You are designing your day's inputs before the day designs you. The in-moment anchor. When you feel the familiar pull to defend a relationship that's contracting you, to seek approval from someone who's already decided, to explain yourself to someone who isn't listening, say it internally, once, then act from that. The 7-day constraint. The shadow audit. One trait you see in the people closest to you that frustrates you most. Write it down. One word. For 7 days, look for that exact trait in yourself, not as self-punishment, but as data. Where does it appear? In which relationships? Under which conditions? What you're frustrated by in others is almost always something you haven't made peace with in yourself. The audit isn't about blame. It's about reclaiming the energy you've been spending on projection. The alliance audit. 2 questions. Answer honestly. Who in my life benefits from me staying exactly as I am? Who respects me more, not less, when I move in a different direction? The evening review. 2 questions, 1 correction. Who did I give authority over my decisions today that I didn't consciously choose to give it to? What would the version of me I'm building have decided instead? 1 correction, not 10. 1 specific behavior for tomorrow, the smallest version of the change that you can actually make. Then make it. Machiavelli's deepest insight wasn't about power over others. It was about the clarity required to see what is actually happening, not what you wish were happening, not what loyalty demands you pretend. Jung's deepest insight wasn't about darkness. It was about integration, the idea that what you refuse to see will run you from below. Put them together and you get this. The people you allow close are not just companions. They are the conditions of your thinking. Change the conditions and the thinking changes. Change the thinking and the trajectory changes. The trajectory is the life. You don't need to become cold. You need to become accurate. If you made it here, you're not like most people. If you made it here, subscribe. You're exactly who this channel is for. Next, the video that follows. Why the most dangerous person in any room never raises their voice, and the next video answers the one question this one deliberately didn't. What does that quality actually look like? In real time, under real pressure. Bell on. Don't miss it. Comment this. Name 1 thing the most expensive person in your life has cost you. That wasn't money. Under 5 words. Let's see what shows up. There's still a person in your life right now. You'd call them close. But now you have a different question about them. Not, do they love me? Where are they pointing me? That question is the beginning of an entirely different life.